in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What was behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come get it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ike. Welcome to Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Okay. And today, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about ethnicities and their political interest. Ethnicities and their political interest, and these becoming public policy. How does that happen in a representative democracy? Let's say we take an ethnicity. Let's say we call them Black people. Let's say now we decide to send 5 more Black people to Congress. Does that mean we have 5 more units of Black representation? Seems to me that is not necessarily the case. There are questions also as to how does an ethnicity define its political interests? Can they be concise? Is it, after all, a monolith? And then also, there's a question of whether the organs of the government are the best place to further the ends of certain ethnicities, right? Are the interests, for example, of the Black community not better served by other means of public organization and other means of relating with the public at large, with the broader government and whatnot? Other modalities of operation, if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, how's it going, Dr. Thunder?
What's happening, man? What's happening?
You all right?
It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Tuesday's crazy. Tuesday's crazy for me, but it's good. It's always a good way to finish out a very busy day with getting ish done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. It's good to see you, man.
Likewise. So we're going to play some content, okay, Dr. Thunder? And then if at any point you want to say something, just tell me to stop it. I'll stop it at points and comment. We'll just interact over the content, right? And the first thing that I'm going to play is from the Glenn Show, from my man Glenn Lowry, okay? And this fine lady here wrote a book, okay? And the book is called, as a matter of fact, Black Faces, okay, Black Interests, Carol M. Swain, okay? Now, a noted social scientist in her own right. And again, ladies and gentlemen, ethnicities and their interests, how does it become public policy in a representative democracy? Do the faces necessarily mean the interests are represented? What exactly are the interests, solidly speaking? Can one divorce them from the interest of the larger body politic sufficiently enough to say that they're defined? And so on and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see what this scholar has to say about a few of these things.
The science in the country, indeed, in the world, and you were a superstar at a very young age. What was the argument of Black faces, Black interests?
Well, during the time I was in graduate school, 1980s, there was this argument that only Blacks could represent Black interests. And Black faces, Black interests started out as a dissertation because I asked, is this true that only blacks can represent?
Well, first of all, have you ever encountered that particular position, any sort of version of the position that only black faces can represent black interests, Dr. Thunder?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's so it's such a common thing that it's easy to manipulate it on the other side. In other words, if I put a black person in here, then it's hard, it goes against this sort of intuition that a black person is going to represent your interests better than, say, a white person. But say the black person actually doesn't have your interests at heart. Say for instance they've been elitist their whole life. They went to Ivy League schools. They went to private schools. They X, Y, and Z. All of the things that would make them not necessarily relate with the sort of John Q taxpayers lifestyle, the black John Q taxpayers sort of lifestyle. But maybe more than that, they have aligned themselves politically with things that will help themselves get over, but that aren't really beneficial for the black community. So, and we know that there are a lot of these kinds of black politicians. We know that there are a lot of them. So it's sort of a using the sort of intuition, this sense of what seems common. It's like, well, it's common sense that black person's going to represent black people better. It seems native. It seems organic. That doesn't seem like you're making a big leap. It doesn't seem like an assumption that's going to get you in that much trouble, right? But yeah, it can be exploited quite effectively and is all the time on the other side of that.
Young age. What was the argument of blackface is black interest?
Well, during the time I was in graduate school, 1980s, there was this argument that only blacks could represent black interests. And blackface is black interest started out as a dissertation because I asked, is this true that only blacks can represent black interests? And so as part of that study, and that is when I contacted you, because I had to I had to come up with an indicator for black interest. And so you were very helpful helping me think that through. And I concluded that political party was more important than the race of the representative, and that as long as blacks held the views they did, they'd best be represented by Democrats. Consequently, it didn't make sense to draw majority black districts. And what was pathbreaking about the book is that I identified the trade-off between black faces, having more black faces in office, and black interests. You could have more black people and have less representation of your policy goals. I was also in the forefront of making the argument that whites would support black candidates, and when black candidates lost, it wasn't because of their race, that they were losing because of their views, that they were so liberal.
Okay, so that is another interesting point there. Well, there have been several interesting points, and you might as well you may comment where you will. But this last point here of you have a black candidate, okay, and this black candidate is running for office, and they're saying, "Hey, I'm not getting white support," and one may say, "Look, it's not like you're not getting white support because you're black. It's because your policies are so damn liberal, right?" Why this does not represent a broader swath of the body politic or whatever, and hence why should you be expecting to get that kind of support? I think that's the last thing that she said there, right? Which is not something that I've kind of heard before. I haven't heard the complaint on the people losing, or heard the counter that says, "Hey, it's not because of that; it's because you're stuck to the Democrat Party and at the certain left end of the Democrat Party, and you're not going to get mass." Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I'm more or less going to restate something I already sort of said, but yeah, I mean, it's not. See, I think one of the challenges is that in most respects, black people don't really know white people, right? So, and understand that white people we understand their language, customs, and different things, right? We're able to do the code switching and all of that. All of that stuff is true, but most black folks don't really know white folks. And I grew up the way I grew up. You know, I grew up in the country, had horses, four wheelers, you know, bikes, you know, all kinds of stuff that it's not usual for black folks, right? Certainly not the kind of thing that inner city black folks would experience. And because of the area that I lived in a rural area, grew up on a dirt road. It's still a dirt road. My parents still, you know, own the same house. Dad still has horses, all of that. But because of where I grew up, there's a lot of white folks around, you know, a lot of farmers.
You saying you understand white folks better? Is that where you're getting at, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, I think growing up around, I think growing up around white folks gives you a different perspective than just sort of seeing them on television, seeing news, especially left-leaning news, tend to sort of represent white folks in a certain way, as though the common a common white person has some sort of nefarious, deep-seated, you know, bias against you because of your skin color. And it's not that at all. In most respects, it's not that at all. What it is exactly as they're saying here. It's the principles, it's the values, it's the policies, right? It's the policies that are objectionable. You know, that's why they don't want to, you know, vote for certain things. And we have to remember that it was white folks that put Barack Obama in the White House. It's not enough black folks to do that in this country. So I think a lot of those talking points, they're just not. It's just not true. It's not true that, you know, white folks, you know, they in general harbor some sort of, you know, anti-black sentiment, and they won't support policies that supposedly are supposed to be helping the black people, and they vote to, you know, do stuff like welfare reform and stuff like that. It's not because they want to see more poor black people. It's because those, you know, those policies don't address any of their interests.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
it's not like black people are strangers to the interest of rural, conservative, perhaps even Christian, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's not
Right.
like black people are strangers to those interests and those modalities.
Right.
So why not bend or morph a little bit in that direction if you're trying to get more support and whatnot? However, okay, so since
go ahead.
You were mentioning, since we're generally talking about a potpourri here of interests, whether it be divided by ethnicity, which is what we're focusing on this case. But the fact that you brought up this divide between rural and urban to begin with, roughly speaking, reminded me of a particular idea of representation, which I heard in some podcast with some nerd dudes that I listen to. It's about the idea of representing geographies, right? Now,
Right.
it was talked about, you know, with respect to electoral college type politics, but it's understanding that, look, like, just to get only people who live on concrete, you know, in densely populated cities to decide for us is kind of crazy, because there's something different about the river or the farmlands or the backcountry or whatever else it may be, or coastal lands. Those environments in and of themselves, insofar as also they contribute, like, for example, farmlands, they bring food and they have their interests too. And that kind of lifestyle needs to be represented as well. But I know this is a tangent, but it brought that interesting point to mind, which is geographies even need to be represented, right? But
candidates lost, it wasn't because of their race, that they were losing because of their views, that they were so liberal. And the book caught a lot of people's attention. It was published in 1993 and updated in 1995 because I had a chapter that discussed what would happen if Democrats lost control of the Congress. And so I painted a picture of what actually happened a year after. And people had never anticipated, because Democrats had controlled the Congress for over 40 years. And so no one thought it could happen, but my book painted this picture of it could happen, and that drawing the majority Black districts was not a way to increase Black representation, but that was a trade-off that they were making.
I want to try something on you, see how you react to it, because Stacey Abrams' name is very much in the news these days. This is the woman who narrowly lost in a gubernatorial campaign in Georgia, and who is on the short list to become the Vice President Biden's running mate for the... Anyway, who lost to, is it Brian Kemp? Is that the guy's name?
Yes.
In Georgia, and refused to concede the election on voter suppression arguments. And here's the provocative proposition I want to put in front of you, Professor Swain. It is this. If Stacey Abrams had been pro-life, she'd be governor of Georgia right now. Okay? So therefore, if all of the people who are hollering about Black people not getting a voice want to have a voice in the South, all they have to do is untether themselves from the left wing of the Democratic Party and reflect the historically resonant moral position of Black people, who are largely reverent Christian people, by standing up for values that are not inconsistent with the interest of Blacks, but rather are an authentic expression of those interests. She'd be governor of Georgia right now. So while she's running around blaming racists for blocking Black people from getting to the ballot box, she's the one who's not representing Black people.
Well, I mean, you could argue that's the entire...
All right, you seem to be not in opposition to that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean see, okay, so there used to be such a thing as blue dog Democrats, and the blue dogs, many of which were pro-life, right? But the Democratic Party has become so left-leaning that they have basically pushed out anyone that is pro-life. And though I'm sure that there are a few pro-life Democrats, it's almost like there's a fear of mentioning this, that you're pro-life as a Democrat, because nobody will caucus with you, right?
And this greatly then hampers all Black politicians, because insofar as the Black community is uncritically wedded to the Democrat Party, right?
Absolutely. So folks like myself, it's interesting too, because what Black folks will tell you is, and I remember, this last election, in Black churches and just Black community and just Black folks in general, there was this pretty usual talking point about, you can't be a one issue voter, and to which, depending on what the issue is, I may tend to agree that you don't want to be a one issue voter, because there's a lot of things to consider. However, if that one issue is Roe versus Wade, so I'm trying to keep it safe for YouTube here. If it's Noit Roba, given the disproportionate targeting of Black pregnancies, so we're in a situation, 670 per 1,000 pregnancies in the Black community, 670 per 1,000 are terminated.
This is a different problem from
67%.
This is a different problem from supporting Roe versus Wade, right?
Right.
Yeah, very, very, and I just think that because you could totally support Roe versus Wade without supporting anybody, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So you can have an issue with that. Okay, so I would be in favor of changing that ruling. Let me be clear on that, because I think that ruling initially, had a disproportionate impact on our community. And if you want to talk about political power, how much political power was lost because of nearly 20 million terminations. And then if you consider if the 20 million terminations did not occur, it's exponential because they would have also procreated. And then so a population that is, 12% or whatever it is, could be easily double that right now. Okay. And if we were going to lockstep with one party, there would be a lot more power. They'd have to do more for us. Okay. So there's that. Okay. So I have that reason. That's a political reason. But then I have a moral reason. And the moral reason is, okay, I'm a Christian. I'm a traditional Christian. Whatever you think that means, that's what it means. Whatever you want it to mean, knuckle dragger, Bible thumper, whatever you want it to, repressive, sexual repressor, all of that kind of stuff. Any of that kind of stuff you want it to mean. That's what I mean. Misogyny, whatever you want it to mean. I'm a traditional Christian, and based on that, the Noit Roba issue is a non-starter. It's not something that I should entertain and be in good standing with the Christian views that I have, the worldview that I have. And there's a lot of Black folks that are that way. So now let's circle back to the one issue thing. Okay. So a lot of folks, you can't be a one issue voter. So whenever you bring up this Noit Roba thing in church communities, Black churches, they say, oh, but that's just a one issue. There's all these other issues too. There's all these other issues. Well, let me put it to you this way. What if that one issue was slavery? See, that changes the whole. That changes the whole dynamic.
Other than slavery, Dr. Thunder. Sorry,
huh?
I said there are more pressing issues than slavery, Dr. Thunder. That's what I would say. Go ahead. I'm just
yeah. But understand. But understand. Would you argue the same way? Would a person that is, you shouldn't be a one issue voter, but what if that one issue was slavery? One party clearly is the anti-slavery party, and the other party clearly is the pro-slavery party. Are you going to tell people, are you going to tell Black people, somehow in this illustration, some Black people can vote, though slavery actually exists? Are you going to tell them? Are you going to tell the Black people that, hey, no, there's other issues other than slavery? No, of course you're not, because it's such a critical issue. If you don't have that right, then it doesn't really matter what else you have right. Because because of the way that it's going to impact your life and the lives of people that are in your community, or even prevent them from having a life.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
you put putting the moral valence on it in terms of, okay, this is a very important morally, right? Slavery, or if Noit Roba, let's just call it. Okay.
Right.
Roe v. Wade. And you shouldn't be trying to run for governor of Georgia and then complaining about voter suppression and such when you're not going to take the position which is the more popular one in a southern state like that. Just political common sense, not even talking about what you really believe, right? So it's a bit silly. But anyways,
she could have even taken like a middle of the road view. Okay, her views on Noit Roba are numbered amongst the most, so severe. I mean, like, she's way over there in that.
Yeah,
she could have just been like.
It's couched in that. It's couched in part of the liberation talk too, in the sense of
right,
Black woman suppression of women's rights. So it is it becomes very highly charged. The emotional temperature goes up the righteous indignation goes up over there. So they can easily forget that they've gone very far into a corner, right? Because after all, we can just say this thing, right? But yeah, these are. I'm sorry. Anything else, or want to?
Yeah. So then the reason that she didn't get elected is because people are sexist, because people are racist, and because they're cheating. They're cheating because they don't want someone. They're fat shaming. It's all of those sorts of reasons instead of just a very simple calculus. Just move a little bit closer to the middle on the Noit-Roba issue. So the thing is Glenn it's clearly the case that if she was pro-life, she would win. But I would also argue that if she was just middle of the road on that issue, she would have likely won.
So it seems like on our way, because one of the things that I mentioned, okay, we're talking about ethnicity and we're talking about their interest, their political interest. How do these become public policy? Okay, and we're going to get later to the fact, what do you mean public policy, and perhaps is public policy the arena, an appropriate arena to be talking about particular kinds of interests, right? Is that the best place to even, forget maybe representation is not even possible, right? Maybe once you get into this particular machine called politics, you're gonna get the same outcome at the other end, no matter what. You're not gonna. But anyways, that's coming down the line. But it seems like we can identify the Noit-Roba issue, the Roe v. Wade issue, to be a critical one if you're talking about Black people and their interests, right? So besides the fact that universally, right, if that because that is a universal thing, right? The Noit-Roba thing, right? Universally, it's a critical thing, but insofar as you've mentioned specific statistics with the Black community, right? Then the overrepresentation of Noit-Roba, if you will, then it is a particular issue. It's something that we can put on the camp and say, well, this is a Black interest. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the critical, the most important issue. I would if I had to give you the maybe the 2 or 3 biggest issues in the Black community, the number one would be Noit-Roba, just based on the statistics. I mean, it's like freaking genocide. I mean, I don't know how else to categorize it.
She's going to talk a little bit more, more about that. Just let's see here.
So while she's running around blaming racists for blocking Black people from getting to the ballot box, she's the one who's not representing Black people.
Well, I mean, you could argue that's the entire
Let's go.
civil rights leadership. Back, in the early days, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton were pro-life. And you think about the millions of Black babies that have been aborted over the decades, they would be voters now. We would be the largest minority in the country, as opposed to Hispanics today, because we have killed off so many, potential Black voters. And so that is very problematic. And it seems that
because that's real voter suppression.
Black women, so many of them have been captured by white liberal feminist politics, and it's not in the interest of Blacks. And I think that Black men, more of them are woke as to what is happening. And as a consequence, President Trump, or candidate Trump, in 2016 got more.
And this is why, now she's as I said, legitimate social scientist, and she's done pretty good work over time. And she even got down to breaking down the gender thing that she just mentioned, that I'm gonna just let's replay that for a second there.
So many of them have been captured by have killed off so many, potential Black voters. And so that is very problematic. And it seems that with Black women, so many of them have been captured by white liberal feminist politics, and it's not in the interest of Blacks. And I think that Black men, more of them are woke as to what is happening. And as a consequence, President Trump, or candidate Trump, in 2016 got more of the votes of Black men than Black women. Black women, they are really deceived. They're working against their own self-interest.
Okay, now we're way out there, and a lot of people are going to say this is far-right crazy talk, but I want to persist for a moment. I mean, on a number of things. You just invoked the personhood of the unborn babies who are aborted by African-American women exercising their quote-unquote right to choose.
She's stealing manosphere talking points?
Yep.
Tommy, you know, someone needs to call Tommy Sotomayor and report her. Because how dare he say that black women deceive? I started saying I was the first to say these black women are deceived. Okay?
You just invoke that. You put that in the context
of a right to choose, in the sense that they are just trapped in so many ways with the abortion clinics in their communities, and the black leaders pushing that it's okay, and the church being silent. And so they are deceived, and it's detrimental to the population. And if the Republicans were doing to black people what the Democrats are doing, we would call it genocide, because it is genocide.
You just called abortion black voter suppression. That's what you just did, Carol. And here's the thing that I find most provocative about this, and I'm not unsympathetic to your position. I'm just going to say that. I know people get angry, but I'm not concerned about that right now. Here's the thing that I find most interesting about it. The question on the table is, what are black interests? What are actually black interests? Pardon?
To be alive, to make a living, you know, to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
No, but they're going to talk about the autonomy. There's going to be a pro-choice argument here. They're going to talk about the woman's autonomy, about her freedom from being told what to do with her body. And they're going to say that black women would have been burdened with the consequences of a pro-life position that would, in fundamental ways, violate the rights of women to be in control.
Now, for those of you who don't know who Glenn Lowry is, right? What you just see, I'm going to call attention to something you guys just saw in the past few minutes, okay? And this is the genius of Glenn Lowry, right? So you see how he's talking now about, oh, you know, the rights of the woman and this and that, and how he's exercised about it. But a few minutes back, he gave a very clear, cogent argument about why, you know, you should be pro-life, right? That kind of thing. This is the genius of Glenn Lowry, right? He can give you your arguments way better than you can, and be a better kind of orator and, you know, expositor of whatever. He is good at that, and that's why when he takes a position, it's very, very well reasoned through. He knows all the counter arguments even more than us. So Glenn Lowry, definitely check him out. Look him up out there on YouTube, Blogging Heads, whatever. Professor at Brown University. But let's go.
Well, what happens to their bodies?
Glenn, aren't you glad that our mothers didn't look at whether or not we would be a burden when they found themselves pregnant with us? Yes. I'm one of 12 children. My mother didn't abort any of her children. And I'm the only one that made it, you know, into the middle class and had a profession. But the rest of them, you know, they do okay. And so I think if you were to interview any of them, they would not say it would have been better off if our mother had exercised her right to choose and had eliminated some of us.
Do you agree with my supposition that Stacey Abrams would be governor of Georgia right now if she had come out pro-life?
Well, she were pro-life, she'd be a Republican, and so she would probably be governor.
I've read, there's a very nice in-depth profile of your academic work that I saw at the Weekly Standard, which I was very impressed by, because the writers seem to appreciate the significance of these two books. We've talked about Black Faces, Black Interests. You anticipate and predict something that actually comes to pass within a decade of the publication of your book, which is the rise of this resentment-fueled and angry identitarian movement amongst white conservative.
Okay, so here's what is going to come up now, and I think it is relevant to the point of. So, I think it is important to the point of ethnic politics in general, and whether or not it is sustainable to continue to play ethnic politics. Okay, why? Because other people can play ethnic politics too. Okay, and maybe they may see down the road where this is all going and decide to cut it short. Right? Maybe they may want to bring things to a more abrupt ending than you. In other words, we're about to talk about the rise of what she calls the rise of the new white supremacy, if you will. In other words, not, oh, this guy, you know, the KKK, you know, missing teeth, not so bright, or knuckle dragger, whatever you want to call it, but more sophisticated people making sophisticated arguments from the point of white identity politics, right? Since other people are doing it, then hey, the white people are not gonna have their ethnicity anymore, even if they want to, because you know there's a within the woke movement is trying to deconstruct the notion of whiteness. Like, oh, how do you bring all these people together? Like, is this a social construct that's meant to, let's break it up? Well, even they can even go and become, again, like Germans or this or that, whatever they want to say. Okay. But if they start playing that game as well, things can get out of hand. And the way that they're playing it now is not the places you expect. Again, it's not knuckle dragger. It was never that, by the way. It's always a caricature when you make a caricature of something, right? But
right.
More highlighting now the intellectual spaces, the fact that other people all can play identitarian politics as well is what is going to come up. I don't know if you have any comments before we play anything about that. Like, what is the danger? There is a danger in identity politics. So goes the argument of the fact that, hey, other people can play it too, and you may not like the way other people play it.
Yeah, I mean, the door is wide open for this. I mean, it's the logical response. I mean, here's one of the issues. So it's the same principle that I think is it's the same issue here that's operating. So one of the issues with the two-party thing, and given the two-party system, and given human nature is such that if you are wronged, you're not going to proportionally wrong the other person. Your tendency is going to be to do something that was worse than what it was that they did to you. Okay? Part of it is because we have a hard time judging our behavior when we are behaving emotionally, as it were. That's part of the issue. And so there's a natural escalation, right? So if somebody cuts your hand off, you want their whole arm. This is why the principle in the Bible, in the Old Testament, an eye for an eye. The purpose of an eye for an eye was not to insist upon blinding the whole world, but rather the purpose of this was to at least establish some sort of equity, some sort of balance with what the punishment was, because of what human nature is. So in a two-party system, when one party acts, they do some clever stuff, they change the rules so that they don't need a super majority anymore. Now they just need, a simple majority to get something through, whatever it is. Then what happens is the opposing party does something that they believe is actually, well, they maybe somewhere in their head they're thinking that they're just doing the same thing that the other party did, but actually what they're doing is it's an escalation. Okay, so so bringing that to what it is that we're talking about now, if certain folks are using identity politics as a way to get power, now they may believe that they have good reasons to do it, and this is the only strategy available to force certain changes quickly. Okay, maybe that's because I'm not going to question someone's motives.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're doing it wrongly. Maybe it's not a good idea to do it because it can be easily manipulated against you, the same tactic that you're using, right? But I'm not going to say that they're bad people or something for doing this. It's just, hey, I found a way to sort of manipulate things and make things go a certain way. It is totally reasonable that people that are in opposition to the sorts of things that you're proposing and getting through like crazy, that they would seek to use the same strategies, and they may actually have bad intentions. So anyhow, it was a long way to tie all that, a long time to tie all that stuff together. But the point is, you got to be, you have to be careful when you're when you're doing shady stuff, when you do shady stuff, other people can also do shady stuff. They can also do shady stuff. You may not like it when they do shady stuff against you, even though you were able to slide and you thought you got away with some stuff. They also can figure out how to use some shady stuff against you, and it's not necessarily what you're going to want. So anyhow.
Very nice, in-depth profile of your academic work that I saw at the Weekly Standard, which I was very impressed by, because the writers seem to appreciate the significance of these two books. We've talked about Black Faces, Black Interests. You anticipate and predict something that actually comes to pass within a decade of the publication of your book, which is the rise of this resentment-fueled and angry identitarian movement amongst white conservatives and white nationalists. And please correct me if I don't characterize this in an appropriate manner. But what do you observe in the book? What do you see happening, and how is it that it is regarded now as having been prescient?
Well, I have to tell you that was the first book I wrote after I had my conversion experience. And I was working on a different book, Glenn, and you're responsible for me switching my focus, because I was working on a book on affirmative action. And if you read The New White Nationalism, it has, maybe 550 pages. It's a long book, because I ended up folding my affirmative action research into The New White Nationalism. But my book before I had an encounter with you at a conference was about When Blacks and Whites Agree, Fairness and Opportunities. And I had done some experimental research that showed if you presented people with concrete situations through vignettes, that whites and blacks would agree on what was fair, even to the point that Black people might select a white hypothetical student over a Black student if that person had a particular profile.
Yeah, and I'm just noting to myself why she would say this, because basically saying, look, there's a neutral way of doing politics such that Black interest, white interest might become common, or at least for certain classes, right, of people, right? There's always going to be outliers and such, and to present politics in otherwise where you create this vicious circle of reciprocity, which is not symmetric, as you identified earlier, and that's the other way, and that'll be the wrong way, right?
And so I found tremendous agreement between whites and Blacks, and I felt like all the division that we were talking about during that time between Blacks and whites over race, that was and on affirmative action, that was part of an artifact of the way we asked the questions, that if you gave people with people real situations, that they would agree. So, I thought that was significant. And this was during the time that Bowen and Bach wrote The Shape of the River, and everyone was talking about affirmative action. And I was so excited because I had the solution. And
what was my objection, Carol? I'm sorry, I don't even remember.
I'm going to get to your objection, but the thing about it is that the world did not receive me in the same way, because the elites, they were ready for the message of Black Faces, Black Interests. But when it came to the fact that I was arguing against race-based affirmative action and more towards class-based, merit-based affirmative action, they were not ready for that. But your objection, you said to me, like, so what? Who cares if whites and Blacks agree? We have serious problems in this world. And I can't remember, more. That's all I remember you saying. But I remember myself being deeply and going home, and then becoming aware at this point in time, and you may recall this, there were high-profile incidents taking place of people going out and shooting others of different race, whether it was a white going out, killing a bunch of Blacks, or Jews, or a Black man that went out and shot white men. All of these, a college student from the University of Illinois that had been recruited to a hate group that went and he killed two people, he shot at 11. All of that was taking place. And I became very curious about what causes a person to hate to the level that they'd want to take someone's life. And I realized that to get that information, you would have to interview the people. And obviously I couldn't interview them, I could not interview them for obvious reasons, because we're talking about white nationalists. I identified 10 for a case study, and I used a white researcher with a PhD that was also at Princeton. I started the research.
This is Russ Neely.
Yes, and so he contacted these individuals. Not a single one said no. He told them he was working with a Princeton professor. Not a single one asked, who are you working with? And they signed 3 releases without asking who he was working with. And some of those, like William Pierce, the guy that wrote the Turner Diaries and a book called The Hunter, and he started the National Alliance. He had a policy of not giving interviews to Blacks and Jews. And he was the one that I feared the most. And the year that the book was published and it started getting attention, he died within 2 months. And boy, was I relieved.
Now, you interviewed Jared Taylor in this as well, did you not?
Yeah, and I tell you, I have a lot of respect for Jared Taylor. And
Are you familiar with Jared Taylor, Dr. Thunder?
I'm not familiar with Jared Taylor.
Okay. Jared Taylor is, you would call, I'm sure he identifies himself as a white supremacist, or is a white supremacist? I don't know what they. So he does that, and he does the, in other words, he takes up the white identitarian banner, right? And he runs with it. But he doesn't quite do it in a, again, not a KKK way. He's just take your craziest woke Black Lives Matter person and then just flip it to a white person, right?
Right.
Doing it on the white side is what he is. But so her position is, that she even, again, because remember, we're talking about Black faces, Black interests, okay? And how do you know what the interests are? And how do you even really know whether there might be overlap of interest perhaps with other groups, and maybe playing this racial politics might lead to bad outcomes? And she's here now saying that she has respect for this one Jared Taylor, whom I just described as probably would be describing himself as a white supremacist. So do you see where she's coming from?
Yeah. No, I do. I do want to maybe underline an aspect of this affirmative action thing that she's not going this way. She's arguing a class-based affirmative action rather than a race-based one. Now, the issue is something that's implied by that, this race-based affirmative action, is the thought that affirmative action has been primarily based on race and not based on gender. Really, the case is that affirmative action and diversity and inclusion are basically gender-based. Okay, so, and this is what I mean.
Well, you're talking de facto, right?
I'm talking de facto. Well, actually, not just de facto, because when you have Title IX in play, that's what actually allows them to take those same policies, affirmative action in particular, which was specifically designed to serve Black men, to address particular issues that were caused by the government, and to put Black men forward, as it were. That's what it was supposed to do, but actually 84% of the recipients of affirmative action have been white women. And so often is the case that these arguments get made, or these sort of anecdotal examples. I did a one of my sort of impromptu live streams a few days ago called "What Do Affirmative Action and Black on Black Crime Have in Common?" And my point was that what's in common is that they are often used in a disingenuous manner. So folks that have anecdotal experience of one of their cousins losing a job, they're white and they're more conservative themselves. Their white cousin lost a job because some Black guy who didn't have as much experience and didn't have the academic credentials got the job because of affirmative action. This story that I remember when I was growing up, I would hear these stories all the time. I told you I grew up in a rural area. That was something, it was a constant thing that I would hear. But it turns out that statistically, the times where a Black man in particular would win a position over some white person is such a statistical anomaly as to be basically zero, right? So maybe you can find a couple instances of this, but the statistics are such that actually the way that this thing works is it's gender based. So having a person that is a woman getting the position is more important to them than whatever their race is. And if you look in institutions of higher learning, if you look in colleges and in universities, there are 20,000 fewer black men in the academy than black females. I'm talking about professors. That's because diversity and inclusion, which is basically affirmative action remarketed, is still gender based. It's still gender based.
Now,
And so
would
that's
you
where that stuff happens.
agree with her class-based thing? Does it provide any recourse for the deformities that you just described in the current system of affirmative action and diversity and inclusion? Will going to a class-based thing help?
I think the real thing that will help is get rid of the real thing that will help is get rid of Title IX. That's
Okay.
what really would help, because all of the I'm talking about in terms of our community, in terms of black people,
Yes.
in terms of the black community.
We've
If you
identified
get
two
rid of
things
Title
now.
IX, yeah, go ahead.
Lloyd Roba, and you think that the Title IX thing is also an intricate part of and I can see how that can get, these two things actually surround the black family, if you will, right?
Absolutely.
You're talking about the ability of men to provide for the family, and
Yep.
the imbalance there between men and women, perhaps, those kinds of things, right? So
Yeah, I
Okay.
interviewed Suzette Speaks last night. That interview just went up this morning, and it was a great conversation. And we talked about cultural and systemic barriers to black love. And so we spent some time talking about affirmative action, diversity and inclusion, and how that's what it's doing is it's actually creating more of a imbalance in education. Since 1976, black women have received 2 times the number of degrees that black men have. Twice the number of degrees. Okay, now in one matter of speaking, you can say, well, it doesn't seem like that could be on purpose. Why? I mean, why would they do that? Is it on purpose? It can't be like is this a conspiracy? Like, what's, in one sense, you can see that I might actually argue that it is a conspiracy. It's so out of balance. It's so wildly out of balance. I mentioned the statistics that you find in high school, that 93% of the class valedictorians and class presidents are female. 93%, right? Now, this is not new. This is not hot off the press information. This is stuff that has been known for a long time. We know that this is the case. We have known that it's the case. But meanwhile, though this is the case, they're still dismantling what few hands-on type of educational opportunities that still existed. They don't exist anymore. Stuff like shop class, stuff like auto class, welding, all of those kinds of wood shop. There were a lot of these kind of classes when I was in high school, but those classes basically don't exist anymore. At least there were classes where you could get, where men who tend to want to work with their hands and tend to learn on the move, as it were, as opposed to sitting in a seat while opening a book. That's not our, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't read. Of course we should. I'm suggesting that young boys, that's not the way that they learn most effectively. We should do something about that. But I would say Title IX, doing something to modify how Title IX impacts our community. And I've already said Noit Roba as one of these things. But to the point about this Jared person, what's his name again?
Jared Taylor.
It's interesting to me. I mean, when you complain, when you protest when you raise issue with a lot of these, flaming lefties and a lot of the sort of Black Lives Matter, Black feminist, and the like sort of, lefty folks, when you do that, immediately there's a huge issue, right? But what is the counterpart to that? What's the counterpart to that? What's the opposite side of that? It's the Jared Taylors. So what are you going to say about that? What
So now,
what did you asked for it. You said you condoned it. You condoned it. You said,
Trump.
hey, leave them alone. They're allowed to do that. Injustice, civil disobedience. They're allowed to do this. They're allowed to say it's justice. One thing that I can't stand is all of these applying the word justice to stuff that is not, that it's not justice. It's not justice what they're talking about. So what was it? Reproductive justice. Like I've heard, lefties say that reproductive justice, or it's as a way to justify anything that you want to justify by just putting the word justice on the end of some straight foolishness.
There's a lot of that goes on in, maybe it's not pedagogy, but in a lot of the teaching type professions, high schools type stuff. A lot of justice in there. I'm like, you're supposed to just teach them grammar.
Right.
What's this, all this justice that you got to bring in. And but anyways, now this brings us to Trump. Why? Because you see, she did already mention Trump before, right? When she mentioned that Trump got more in 2016 of the black male vote than women. And this whole thing of kind of detangling an ethnic face from ethnic interests has led us a few places, but it should take us to Trump now. And
ask you about Donald J. Trump. You serve on the National Advisory Board of Black Voices for Trump, if I'm not mistaken.
Black Voices for Trump. Apparently, it's a thing, and she's there. Okay, let's go. Right.
Ask you about Donald J. Trump. You serve on the National Advisory Board of Black Voices for Trump, if I'm not mistaken. You are an open, out of the closet, overt, and unreconstructed Trump supporter. Can you please explain yourself to the rest of America?
Well, the most important thing for me to explain is that I've spent my life avoiding Black stuff. Like, I just wanted to be a political scientist. I wanted to be the best political scientist I could be. And I was not active in the Black Student Union. Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. I was not active in the Black student unions. I was not active in Black things. I didn't want to be a Black something. I just wanted to be me. And so when Black Voices for Trump approached me, it was not an easy decision to affiliate with something that was exclusively Black. But I realized that whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, that you have to fit in a box. And so I even had someone tell me, which box do you fit in? Do you want to be in the religious box? Because I'm a person of strong faith, I could be in the religious box. Well, God didn't call me to be exclusively in the religious box, but being a part of Black Voices for Trump, I made that decision because I thought that was the most effective way to help him win re-election. I believe that he is important for America, that he's done tremendous things for Blacks, and that the country was on the right trajectory before the coronavirus and the hysteria around it. And I believe that keeping the coronavirus and the fear and all of these lockdowns and restrictions, that it's gone beyond trying to keep people safe, that it's all politically motivated now. The Democrats see an opportunity to get everything they ever wanted on their socialist wish list by keeping the country shut down. And that's a part of what's going on. So I am a proud member.
So now she's stealing your talking points. Well, let's see. Let's hear a little bit more of that again.
That he's done tremendous things for Blacks, and that the country was on the right trajectory before the coronavirus and the hysteria around it. And I believe that keeping the coronavirus and the fear and all of these lockdowns and restrictions, that it's gone beyond trying to keep people safe, that it's all politically motivated now. The Democrats see an opportunity to get everything they ever wanted on their socialist wish list by keeping the country shut down. And that's a part of what's going on. So I am a proud member of Black Voices for Trump. And I was also, up until recently, the Black Outreach Director for the Mighty American Strike Force. And that's a group that sends out volunteers to battleground states. I'm moving into the position of outreach for college students, and I'm on that steering committee. But as long as the world is kind of organized around race, I felt like, and this was a prayerful decision, that I can do more by being on Black Voices, being a part of Black Voices for Trump, and being a part of outreach to Blacks than I can by maintaining my individuality.
Okay.
Here, can I say something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is interesting because there is there's a lot in common. There's a lot in common between the way that I was trying to move, especially as a younger person, and then with the sort of transformation, the sort of way that I move now. So for instance, in my thoughts about Black History Month, my approach to Black History Month in the past was always, sort of the Morgan Freeman approach. What, I don't, do you want a White History Month? No. Well, I don't want a Black History Month either. Are you gonna squeeze all of our history into 1 month? The whole idea of, the way to get rid of racism is to stop talking about it. To have folks just basically go about your lives, do what it is that's necessary to become the best that you can be. This sort of approach, and certainly not being associated with stereotypically Black stuff, right? That was like it was rather important to me, and I'm not just talking about fried chicken and watermelon. But now I see this differently. So the thing is in order to be effective, you have to work within the existing structures. Certainly you can burn the whole thing down and then out of the ashes build something.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to have any impact, you have to find hierarchies, as it were. You have to find associations that you can sort of move within, that you can sort of exploit, their sort of political capital, the way that they're set up, their structure. You can exploit their structure. And so that has been, as of late, has been more of a strategy to sort of, you've heard me say my support for Black men and boys. I think to the extent that there is a community that is supporting that sort of thing, I think a lot can be accomplished. So I hear what it is that she's saying. I understand the resistance to sort of aligning with something that there's where maybe you admire the people involved. You want to distance yourself from a lot of the sort of strategies and, negative aspects of what those sort of organizations are, what they represent, the kind of people that they represent, or whatever. So I get that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of working within the already existing structures, there is a question of what are the best structures, right? What is the best way? What are the most effective structures, in other words? They may not be the biggest, but depending on your particular outcome that you want, which you have to first define. And so far we have a list. We have 2 on there at least, right? And depending on your particular outcome, there's going to be various ways of going about doing things, to get what you want. and it may not necessarily be voting. It may not necessarily be calling your congressperson. It may be in the area of community organizing in a non-governmental way, if you will, civil society, if you will, right? So that's what we're gonna. Let's delve into that a little bit. This is what's his name? Well, maybe his name will be mentioned here because I'm not seeing my. I can't zoom out here, but he is a public organizer type individual, not in government, has been doing it since forever, okay? And he has certain insights as to what the interests are and how they may best be met, right? So let's give this a listen.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, you can't hear. How did that happen? But you were hearing the other video, right?
Yep, I heard the other video.
Interesting. Okay. I'll give it another go. Let's see. And yeah, these people are not what's going on with the super chat, A Hill and the rest of y'all. Okay. I didn't look at that. Let me look at it again. Yes, the Woodson Society. The button is clicked. 6 Islands of Excellence. All right.
I'm in with a question from now and then. And then I'll.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I'm glad to be able that you could say that.
And I'll just stop. Why don't you tell people, please, a little bit about the work that you have been doing at the Woodson Center, and then perhaps a little bit about the 1776 project, and I can chime in with a question from now and then. And then I would like us to spend some time before we're done talking about the state of African-American people, the nature of the struggle, the character of leadership, and the narratives that are abroad in the land in terms of how we Black people are thinking about our situation. I don't know if that's too much to try to cover in one presentation.
Well, I think in the interest of time, let me just give you a 4-minute snippet on my background, and I think that's just important. I was born in Philadelphia, and my dad died when I was 9, leaving my mother with a 5th grade education to raise 5 children in a troubled neighborhood. It was troubled, but it was also a neighborhood that had 90% of homes with a man and a woman raising children.
And that point is key. That point keeps coming up over and over again. And well, let's continue.
What year was that, Bob, if I may ask?
1937. I was born in 1937. I just turned 83. Delighted to be able to say that.
Praise God, as we used to say, Bob.
Yeah.
Because everybody is not going to get there. Let's just be clear about that.
No, but also I just think I was, so given that kind of background, I had to rely on my friends. I had a group of about 6 friends who are close to this day. 3 of us are no longer here. But when they graduated from high school before me, I was left unaffiliated. In my neighborhood, you don't grow up like that. So I quit and went into the military at 17. But in there, I found myself. They trained me. I was in the space program, and I got my GED in the military and came out. And my form of affirmative action was driving 30 miles a day to a full-time job and going to college full-time. And so that was my affirmative action. Thank God I didn't come along with affirmative action. But as a consequence, I got involved, finished undergraduate school and working in a juvenile jail, locked behind 3 doors with 65 juveniles in there from gang murder to truancy. But they were the same kids I grew up with. And so I kind of fell in love and had a kind of burning bush experience. 6 of those boys I would have adopted if I had the means to do so. So they were there because.
Yeah, so kind of makes sense, right? He's going to come at it from a different angle, right? He was there in there with the prisoners, and he's gonna approach it. Let's see.
Of their circumstance, but there were some there because of their values. So long story short, I graduated, got involved in master's in social work, and then I went to work in the foster care system and saw how that system was destroying children. Got involved in the civil rights movement, having led demonstrations in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the home of Baird Rustin. But in doing so, I left the movement, man, very disappointed following the death of Dr. King, when I realized that a lot of people who suffered most didn't benefit from the change, that low-income Blacks were used as the bait for attracting programs and relief. But when the benefits came, it went to middle-class Blacks like myself and not.
So here again, we see the similar pattern of the bait and switch you mentioned earlier about the affirmative action. There, it is sold as one thing. Yay, here's this thing for Black men, and then it ends up with very different outcomes. And in this case, it's, hey, the middle class really getting the benefits. They get to get into these programs and administer the programs in the municipal level, the city level, state level, and whatnot in these government agencies. But does the money really do anything for the people? If one may not have already suspected by now, the whole idea here is, hey, government and representation within government might not be where you need to be looking, right, in order to get these interests. Now, for Roe v. Wade, as you said earlier, that's a different thing. But perhaps you need to start from grassroots even to do that, to change that, right? But let's see.
To the people in whose name it was demanded.
Okay, let me just interrupt for a minute, but you were telling us about, your background. I want you to continue. I just want to pause for a moment and ask, because these years in the 1960s, the years of Great Society and equal opportunity programs, these are formative. This is a formative period. The beginning of the expansion of welfare, and a lot of people would say that welfare dependency was not a healthy thing for the social fabric of the African-American community. The beginning of the transformation of the civil rights movement from a universalist, I have a dream speech kind of movement into a Black Power movement. And, I was going to ask you what you thought about Malcolm X, how he factored in these years, because these are the very years when his ministry was powerful. And because I think that relates, and excuse me for interrupting you, I want to hear your story about the contemporary time, because some of those same fissures I think I see in African-American leadership and voice, even in the present day. So, how'd you react to the radicals of your time? I'm talking about the Black radicals, the Stokely Carmichaels.
There was a time that I was a part of them, but what was very important at the time then is the quality of the debate within the Black community. We had Dr. King, I Have a Dream. You had Malcolm X, who was challenging. There you had the Black Panther Party, who were insurrectionists. You had the Republic of New Africa that said we should have a separate state. But then there was vigorous debate within the Black community. Even the civil rights movement fractured on the issues of whether we should engage in civil disobedience. The lawyers in Atlanta believed that we should seek a redress to the courts, but the students at Greensboro said, no, we want to demonstrate. And so there was a lot of fracturing, healthy fracturing of the community as we sought our way forward. When Dr.
You see what he sees, or this is before your time? By the time you got here, everything was already rotten. Or do you see this progression into perhaps not as vigorous debates, maybe more monolithic, maybe more, or maybe not so rich in terms of the discussion, in terms of policy, the movement, or even the interests of the group?
Yeah, I mean, it had already deteriorated by the time I came along, but I will say that it's gotten worse, significantly worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's it really sucks, because the idea of institutions of higher learning, the whole idea is to is to have different is to have ideas challenged, and as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron, right? So everyone gets better by challenging ideas, but it's become such a sort of what's the term that we use frequently in YouTube?
Echo
where everyone,
chamber.
echo chamber. It's become such an echo chamber, and has become so suspect to groupthink, as opposed to individual thought and real diversity of thought. The desire is more about the look than it is about the substance. I want to look diverse. I want to be able to say that I represent all of these different kinds of people, as it were, but really they represent the same kind of people, but they just happen to look different.
This is kind of interesting, because we we alluded to the Democrats pushing out a certain segment of the public, and this will involved maybe more rural people, maybe people who were a little bit more conservative socially, and also we talk about that knuckle dragger. Okay, let's think of this knuckle dragging, hard hat wearing union guy with a hairy chest and his conservative views, right? That guy, right? He's been kind of moved away, and the whole game now is, well, you play this.
That guy used to be a Democrat, by the way.
100%. That's the point. The whole point of this is
Teamsters.
The whole point of it, and you know, and you've heard me make this argument before, or this particular assertion as to why he got pushed away, right? In other words, there's no reason to lose a vote, right? Like, why would you push this guy away? Like, I have a reason why, but basically the game now, the game left for them to play is the intersectional identity politicking, and because it has many, it's so many ways to flip the cards, right? So many intersectionalities and so many ways in which to stoke the identity feelings of people and make it such that you are the one representing them, make them feel as though I mean to say as though you were the one representing them, and so on. And I think that the reason that the guy was pushed away is because really they don't have the actual economic goods for that guy anymore, either because they completely sold out too, right? That they're also just corporatists and globalists and neoliberal whatever themselves, right? That they don't really have anything for that guy. Okay, they sold out too, and all they can do now is play this game. So goes the theory. It's an economic one. But let's give another shout out to, or let's give a shout out, okay, if you don't mind reading.
Absolutely. A Hill with the $10 super chat. Thank you very much for the support. Here's to rethinking Black mobilization, its self-selected leadership, and its infrastructure.
Indeed.
And I think you got another one there too. Yes. The super sticker from Terrence Evans. $5. Thank you very much.
Damn. I haven't seen that mic drop one before. That's a good one. Okay. So let's continue here. As he goes.
Dr. King merged the civil rights movement with the peace movement. He was called a communist by Carl Rowan, the liberal journalist for the Washington Post. But Dr. King prevailed. And so, but there was rigorous debate, but there's also standards of behavior as well. You could not be a participant in the civil rights movement if you were drunk or if you were rude to people. We had standards of conduct. The reason that Rosa Parks was chosen is because she had middle-class values. But what I witnessed, Glenn, that disappointed me, that caused me to leave, was on the whole issue of forced busing for integration. I felt it was wrong. I felt it was anti-Black. So, and I felt that we should be, and so I left on that. But also I led them.
We can park right there. I did a show on Thunder's Thoughts called Separate but Not, or Separate but Equal, Not a Bad Thing. So the issue with separate but equal is that it was separate, but it was not equal. Okay. And you got a Plessy versus Ferguson, where we sort of start talking this whole separate but equal business. Brown versus Board of Education definitively showed that it was separate, but it was not equal. And therefore, in order to fix this issue of lack of representation, lack of, support, financial support and otherwise for the segregated Black stuff, they said, well, the only way that we can fix this is we can bus kids around. Now, if you had been doing it in a balanced fashion, I referred to this as being forced integration, by the way.
Yeah, and
If
why
you
don't
had
you just
done
go
it,
all the way there? Let's go all the way there, and let's tie it to the topic at hand. For example, okay, you're talking about
sure.
black representation, okay, right?
Yes.
You're talking about black representation within the larger institutions of governmental institutions in this particular case, right?
Hmm.
And one may say, well, if I push your argument to the logical conclusion, says, well, to hell with the larger institution and being represented therein, and for many reasons, and you may even convince me that, hey, it doesn't even solve any of my problems if I go in there. As a matter of fact, if I go in there, it's the end of me. It's my ruin. I have interests. I will define these interests, but the best way to get there has nothing to do with integration, real or
Nope.
quasi or fake or whatever, into the institutions and have all this fake representation and whatnot. That it's not the way of more of a separatist kind of a attitude. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, I'm saying what Malcolm said. Malcolm said that this whole trying to force integrate. See, look, I dug Jesse Jackson when he was a black nationalist. When he became a racial integrationist, that's when I part ways with Jesse. I think it's also interesting that in addition to migrating towards racial integrationism, he also became pro-choice.
Hmm.
Right? I don't think that that is a coincidence.
Coincidence. No coincidence.
I think that there is there are things that travel together, as it were. But yeah, I mean, Malcolm, he said, look, why would people that are economically and politically superior welcome you with open arms? You're inferior. He's talking about black people. He's not talking about with respect to humanity. He's talking about political power, economic power.
And
If you
okay,
in a relation,
let me overstate that point in the sense that the inferiority. If you imagine, let's say you have your family, your crew, your clan, your house. You've built something. Some other people from across the fence are coming in, okay, and materially, evidently, objectively, there's some inferiority in terms of their standards, right? But also, in fact, in your consciousness, they are inferior in humanity, okay? Because human beings are not saints, right? So we have to take that into, if you get my point, is you have to take the whole thing that they do see you as inferior in humanity too, and that's no shade to them. It's just understanding your position, right?
yeah, I think if you combine the categories, I think okay. Um, his point primarily, even if you include the humanity component, was just to say someone embracing you that does not want to embrace you, that is hypocrisy. Right? You're okay, you got your arm around this person. Oh yeah, this is my guy, but you're thinking, man, I really do not want to be around this person. And what do I have to gain by putting my arm around someone that cannot give me anything in return? That can't what is the point of this relationship for me? How does it benefit me? Matter of fact, it doesn't benefit me at all. And so his argument was we need to build ourselves up as a community, not relying on anything from, as he put it, the white man. And once we have gotten to that place as equals, when you meet with an equal, if your tribe, as it were, is equal to another tribe, the issue of integration never comes up because there is nothing to gain by integrating per se. It's only when there is the sense that there is something to gain that that topic would arise. No one cares. I mean, what? Look, if I'm in my group now understand. I think it is important for people to be able to associate with whom they desire, to move amongst who they desire, no matter what their race is.
We
And
got to
so,
give the standard. Like, I'm not saying people can.
right. So I'm not. I'm
Nothing.
not.
Oh,
Right.
that tax. How much time has been wasted? I wonder if there can be a calculator. News and this and that. When every time we say, well, I'm not saying this, and I'm not saying you should kill your brother. It's just like, oh my God, how much energy has gone into that? Anyways, go ahead.
So, of course, I think that equality is important, but this idea that we should be thoroughly and totally mixed up and integrated is, it's ridiculous. I did another one of my impromptu streams on the topic celebrating first blacks presupposes that the racial integrationists are right. Celebrating the first blacks presupposes that the racial integrationists are right. And of course, I do not believe that the racial integrationists are right. I think they're wrong. And this is part of the reason that I do not participate in this celebration of the first black vice president, the first black. I don't care about that. That doesn't matter to me, especially when though they look like me, they do not represent my interests.
3 things now. Noit Roba, right? And then there was the, is it around for affirmative action more or less? Right? Is that your second point? Or
I'm sorry. So do this again. Give me the first point and keep going.
Noit Roba, we were talking about, okay, what are going to be the interests that you can list on the table if you have like a simple list? You had the
Right.
Roe v. Wade, very key aspect of for the black community. And I think we went over another point, perhaps having to do with affirmative action, which you said removal of Title IX, right?
Title IX,
So,
yeah.
and we talked about how those things kind of resolve around the black family and whatnot. And then now, number 3 is a stance towards this, not assuming, not presuming that it is right to integrate, right? That is necessarily good. It's a foregone conclusion. It's now just a question of the accounting. We need 5 more units, 5 more CCs of black in this particular House of Assembly. Stat. fetch
that's
it
the
for
problem.
me.
Look,
From standard casting.
People don't recognize this. They don't think about this. But all of those issues are downstream from the wholesale swallowing and acceptance of this racial integrationist morality almost, right? It's like a religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a pillar of a religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look,
we are the world.
Perfectly put. Perfectly put.
Let's okay. So we're gonna. The time is. Seems like our time is spent. Let's play a little bit more here, okay? And he has kind of given us an inside view, and obviously he has a lot of experience, but a view from the side of the person whom is actually in the jail, ministering to these people, if you will, right? Down there with the poor and the sick and the lame, right? So let's see.
Demonstrations outside of a pharmaceutical company And when they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists. And when we asked these brothers and sisters to join us, they said, we got these because we were qualified, not because of what you all did. So I realized that there was a huge class split in the black community. And so after that happened 2 or 3 times, I left the movement. And then I watched how our black politicians morphed into, our black civil rights leaders became Democratic politicians at a time when the poverty program was expending $22 trillion. So they became mayors and administrators of those funds.
Okay.
I saw the corruption occur.
Excuse me again for interrupting. And I just want to, there's so much information that's coming out. You left, okay? That's the first thing. You left the movement and struck out in a new direction. You were on the other side of the busing debate from the civil rights community for reasons that you thought even had to do with being anti-black. You saw a class issue in the civil rights struggle as you came to see that people on the streets were not always the ones getting the benefits. People in the suites were the ones that were getting the benefits.
Absolutely.
And you saw a bureaucracy emerge, institutionalized, dug-in kind of profession of advocating on behalf of Black people, but not really being accountable to Black people.
Absolutely. There's right on my wall, I have a framed headline from the Washington Post, October 29, 1965, written by reporter Bill Raspberry. And the banner headline is, "Poor Negroes are not benefiting from the gains of the civil rights movement." And that has driven me from that time to today. And that is profoundly true, because of the $22 trillion spent over 50 years on the poverty programs, 70 cents of every dollar goes not to the poor, but those who serve the poor. They ask which problems are
man,
fundable,
stop
not which
this,
ones
man.
are solvable.
Okay, I have to I gotta bring up Minister Jap.
Okay.
I gotta bring up Minister Jap. Minister Jap, he frequently refers to the old comfortable Negro. And of course it is a pejorative. And his distaste for the old comfortable Negro is primarily because, as he put it, all you had to do is give them a good job with some benefits, and they would sell out the cause. They would become distracted. And this is exactly what this guy has said. So the movement was going a certain direction. And then when it seemed as though a good job with some benefits could be involved, a really good job with some really good benefits, many of them totally changed their song. They started singing another song because they saw that they could benefit themselves personally by signing on the dotted line. In the Black manosphere, boomers, the boomer generation, they take a lot of licks, right? And this is not to say that all boomers are this way, but there's a lot of them that are that way. And I've experienced in my own life, there's this thing where boomers will not be particularly helpful to you as a young man trying to learn the ropes, right? And aren't always willing to provide a certain level of mentorship, right? And you hear certain things, and you hear certain things like, I lost my train of thought because I started looking at the chat. But
basically the old comfortable Negro. Okay, go ahead.
The old comfortable Negro. I mean, but boomers will, they'll almost argue for this idea that you should have to learn for yourself. You know, they supposedly had to do it themselves. So you should have to do it for yourself. You know, and that doesn't seem to me in uh in in
Well,
line with, in agreement with the idea of trying to bring things up, right? So it's kind of like I'm a teacher, right? So if I just tell my student, you know, I'm a music teacher, so I tell my student, you'll hear it, you'll hear it. Just listen to it a bunch more times, you'll hear it. Now I could just tell them what it is. I could actually help them by telling them, right?
mhm.
But you know, you'll hear it. You know, you'll hear it. That's not that is what is the point of me being the teacher if I'm not going to tell them what it is that I know, you know, that could expedite their progress.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
boomers
So
are a unique generation for many reasons too, right? They're the richest generation. The boomers in America, the richest generation of people that ever existed, right? That's
Yeah.
not hard to believe. It is modern times after all. And what you said about the fact that they say things such as "I learned myself, so you have to," that struck me psychologically as more of I got away with crap, right? In other words, I was put in a safety bubble, and my parents were probably going to like spare, you know, get me out of trouble or whatever. And I look at that as though, oh, I grew I'm a self-made man because of that, right?
Right.
There is that complex that happens, and then with the kids, just like the kids are just like minimal effort, like, yeah, you know, I'm just trying to get out of here and go to Cabo or retire somewhere, and screw you, and whether you can buy a house or not, that's not my problem. I'm good. Anyways, so let's see here a little bit more, and then we'll start bringing our thoughts together here, and maybe we'll finish this video next time, or we'll
Yeah.
address this. We'll continue this topic next time.
Another fact, Glenn, only 2 out of 10 whites with college education works for government. 6 out of 10 blacks with college education works for government.
Let's go.
And boom, and just like that, that's where we're gonna start talking. Let's land the plane. That's a good place to stop. Come back next week on Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder, okay? And we'll continue this conversation on this particular weekly segment here. But overrepresentation in government work, right? And then you, for example, saying you having the position that it is extricating oneself from these organs, right? The government, for example, that therein lies the solution, right? Extricating yourself. And then you find out that the group is actually overrepresented in the places where it shouldn't be, and being comfortable in there, right? With the old comfortable Negro aspect. So I think that was very apt right there. I think he was dropping jewels. Yeah, he was really laying it out. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about ethnic groups, and we shall continue the conversation. Ethnic groups, their political interests. How do these political interests become public policy in a representative democracy, right? Can these interests be defined? Does simply counting the number of said faces, said ethnic group, hey, I have 5 black faces, does that mean I have 5 units of black representation? Well, obviously, that's not necessarily the case. So what does it mean then? And then we heard from Glenn Lowry interviewing the lady earlier, talking about things such as shared and common interests, okay? Talking about ways in which we can look at things in a more class-based way rather than a race-based way, and talk about the dangers of looking at things in of doing the identitarian politics because other people can do it too. And she predicted, it was said, the kind of white nationalism that we see now, which is not just knuckle dragging stuff, but people like Jared Taylor, you might think his ideas are despicable, but he's not a knuckle dragger, right? He's making arguments, and they're dangerous because they can actually appeal to people. And I hate to use the word dangerous. I think it's like one of these kind of weird things to say, you know, he's dangerous. But the point being, you should pay attention to these kinds of people because they're actually making points, right? You can't just be like, go ahead.
And a certain precedent has been made,
Exactly.
so that makes his arguments more persuasive.
100%.
Because he can just cite the precedent.
Exactly. And the people who he's talking to, it's like if you want to take a position on masks, for example, it's a point you can just go in there, state your point, and you have people who are gonna be like, yeah, you see, I see that, because there's already a lot of controversy and this and that within that. It's not exactly a precedent type analogy that I'm giving, but yes, the area is already very well primed for them to come in and do their thing. But those are my kind of final thoughts and summary there of kind of where we started and where we ended, in the sense that separatist, and then there's this aspect which we're going to continue next time of working within non-governmental organizations, or looking at things such as a civil society and the churches, and changing the communities and the hearts, the spiritual solution, if you will, next time. But any final thoughts and something to promote there?
Yeah, I've got something to promote, and that's an episode of Thunder's Thoughts. And we're going to be looking at a Black Pill Gnostic video, BGS it more. And the name of the episode is young men are removing themselves from the dating market, are not participating or opting out, as it were. So that's going to be a very interesting sort of episode. I've got an article that we'll be looking at also, and Victoria will be narrating for us. She's our reader. She does a very good job. She doesn't make any mistakes. That's right. That's because she's a computer. Anyhow, so there's that. I had my interview with Suzette Speaks. As I said, go and check that out. It was a really good conversation. And of course, we've got our show coming up this Sunday, Case Closed. And it will be on Ike's channel, actually. It ordinarily would have been on mine, but I actually have a gig right at 4:00. But I'll be hopping on for the second half of the panel show. We had a really great show this past Sunday. You should really check that out. Those are some really good panels. Dana with the Data, had LAR Movement on there, Ramil, and Ike and myself. Did Game Changer show up at the end?
Yeah, he came in at the end, just like he came in at the end of the other one.
Was it like
it was both
like
of
World
them?
War III?
Yeah. Again, like both of them did the thing again.
This is great.
and Dana with the Data was like, "Oh, you need to. Ike and I started this, so you need to remove him. He had his last word. Like he forgot there.
Man."
Oh, silly.
Of course, I could only participate for a little bit because I had a gig last week. But man, I wish I was at home for that episode, for the whole thing. That was even just the 30 minutes that I was on for was quite entertaining. I mean, just for me, it was entertaining.
It was funny when you tried to. You said, "How about we just?" You try to introduce a point such as lazy and stuff like that, and and you were like, "Oh, it's a fine point, but how about?" And it was like, people felt quite strongly all of a sudden about this mental slavery thing, where it's like, no, if you're lazy, you're mental, you're also enslaved. You don't polish your shoes, you don't iron your shirt. That's mental slavery.
Well, yeah, exactly. So it was funny because of course there was some conflating happening with when I started using elitism, you need to be careful. As soon as I said that, then it was like that blew it up. It was not going to be understood.
That was the second time that happened with that very word. There was a previous episode, okay, that it also happened. Okay, it was K Polymath came in and said something about you being an elite, or all he sees here It's
Oh,
elite, blah,
that's
blah, blah.
right. That's right.
And it
That's
also
right. She
costs the
doesn't like
same.
that. She
Because
doesn't. She doesn't like
doesn't
that.
like the word. Doesn't
She
like,
doesn't like that.
doesn't like the word. It's like
That's
what do you mean?
Oh,
Anyways.
that's great, man.
Anyways,
Oh,
ladies and gentlemen,
she's a great. She is a great addition. She's a great addition to the panel. This is good. Very entertaining shows. Each show that she's been on has been quite entertaining.
Indeed.
So shout out to Dana.
Shout out to Dana, indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't really have anything else. I mean, we'll be back next week.
We'll be back next week, and I'll be here tomorrow with Joan. Okay, so catch us around same time, evening time when things are cool. Wagwan, peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.